Hello, everyone. Welcome to our next installment on interviewing people and talking about their career path and career growth. Obviously, with a little bit of a focus on Silicon Valley right now in tech, but with me today is Caroline Tsay. She's the founder and CEO of a brand new startup called Compute Software. So, Caroline, I'll let you start out with explaining what that is, and because this is actually really fresh, right?
Yes, just as of several months ago.
Cool. Very cool.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Larry. First off, it's great to see you and to be able to have this conversation with you. So I actually officially started Compute Software with three other co-founders just about 3 months ago.
Wow.
Anything to do with optimizing and automating cloud resource decisions for companies running in the public cloud or private cloud is what we do.
Cool.
There's a lot of challenges today in dealing with infrastructure choices in the cloud, and especially as your business is constantly changing, that demand changes, and it's hard to predict how to manage through all of that. So we're making it very simple for companies out there through an enterprise SaaS product and platform.
Very cool. Can you explain a little bit about what differentiates you a bit from people who are trying to roll their own with Amazon services?
Yep. So Amazon, Google Cloud, Microsoft all offer something called auto scaling today, a basic capability to scale up and down. But that's all backwards looking. It's not future looking or predictive in the sense that your demand is constantly changing. So we know that past demand is not a good reflection of necessarily the next hour of demand. So we've got tons of predictive models where we're figuring out pricing on Amazon or any of the providers, as well as what your demand looks like, and choosing optimal choices as far as instance types, locations, scaling up and down, cluster co-location, sharding, etc.
Oh, very cool. So predictive modeling, which is extremely hot right now. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So this is a big change for you, moving from the corporate world. And we had worked together many years ago at Yahoo, and I know you've been at HP, but I think for a lot of the folks listening, you've had a very exciting career, and one that I think a lot of younger folks who are coming up through this path would be very interested in hearing how you managed to do that and where you got your start. So maybe you can turn the clock back a little bit, and we can talk about where you started with all this, maybe even talking about school. It's up to you, and the path that got you to where you are right now.
Okay. All right. So I actually grew up in Silicon Valley, in Almond Valley in South San Jose.
Cool.
So I've been here my entire life, pretty much, and had gone to college at Stanford, did my undergrad there in computer science, and then did my master's in management science and engineering. I knew that I didn't want to go out and be a software engineer, as much as I really appreciate my technical background now, and being a STEM major. So that's why I did my master's in management science and engineering, which is like a quantitative MBA, if you will.
Yeah.
And after Stanford, I ended up going to IBM to do consulting in supply chain and CRM, and worked with all kinds of clients from so many different industries, got a lot of great exposure to these different companies and the way that they did things.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a perfect setup to broaden my business experience, as well as the fact that I would leverage my technical background in all of the implementations I was doing with these clients.
Right.
But I was traveling a lot at IBM and back and forth, going from San Jose to Chicago. I was getting a little tired of doing that for a year, every week, going back and forth.
Every single week?
Yes, every single week.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yes. And it turned out that one of my grad school friends was at Yahoo at the time. So he reached out and said, Caroline, would you be interested in checking us out? And I thought so many of my friends and peers in Silicon Valley had been in the consumer internet space. Yeah. I had to go check that out. So that's why I went over to Yahoo, was to see what consumer internet was all about. Sure. It was a fantastic experience being there because I got to work on the whole gamut of search, advertising, e-commerce, and get a lot of exposure to media and content. So it was a perfect experience, getting to learn so much at Yahoo. And then I transitioned over to HP. I had an opportunity to go to HP to build a whole new business, a whole new platform for marketing and selling our enterprise software, and to build a whole new organization. And while you think HP, a traditional, very large company, there were challenges with politics and bureaucracy. It was just a great opportunity for me to, again, learn something new and be challenged in a new way. So that was HP. I was there for 3.5 years, and then just recently left to start Compute Software. And in fact, if it weren't for my experience at HP, dealing with our own infrastructure challenges and trying to run a business on that, migrating over to AWS, et cetera, would I not have started this company? So it's really about that experience and that problem that I faced.
I've noticed that trend because I think, we've both been at Yahoo and other places. I was at IBM too. I didn't realize. I forgot that we overlapped, or we both had worked at IBM. But I think a lot of the startups that I see come out of Silicon Valley that come from folks who've been in big corporate environments come from a pain that they experienced at that company, either themselves or they saw that some of the partners or some of the people who are trying to collaborate with the big company face this pain. They said, you know what, there's got to be a better way to do this. And the big company is either unable or unwilling to take it on. And so do you see that yourself as you start to look at some of the patterns of startups that are being founded in the Valley?
In general, probably so. That the idea and the kind of passion comes from something that you personally faced or dealt with. I think that's a generalization. And of course, when you're at a large corporation or going down that corporate career path, right? It's not something that the company necessarily wants to go off and do. It's something that you think is a pain point or challenge to go and solve. And so I haven't looked back. I think there's such a tremendous pull and huge opportunity here that my team and I, an organization, I can go and solve. And so we're go all the way now.
That's fantastic. So this is an important question because I've talked with some younger startup founders, or wannabe founders, I should say. And one of the big questions they have is, should I start my own startup straight out of school, or maybe not even going to school? Or should I do a few years in a corporate environment to kind of learn the ropes and learn and experience, like you were just talking about the experience at HP? What are your thoughts on how much your corporate experience prepared you to be a startup founder?
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of people will say, oh, you've been in the corporate world for so long. How could you start a company or be an entrepreneur? And it's like, okay, well, you go through a lot of experiences. You learn how to hire, you learn how to manage and lead teams. You're experienced in working with others, right? You've got exposure to a large network, which is great from a sales and BD standpoint, as well as a hiring standpoint. So there are just so many benefits, I think, of going down that path.
Right.
Now, I think it totally depends on the entrepreneur situation if they're interested in starting a company. To me, a couple of things that really helped when I first started out were, one, the network, right? So I've been connected to a number of investors or potential investors that I was looking to tap into.
Right.
Getting into the fundraising process and kicking that off was relatively easy in that sense. I'm not saying the fundraising process is easy at all. But just having the connections in the network is really important. And I think it would be worth going into the corporate path to just build that up, because you're going to meet people, and then you're going to meet people who know people.
Right.
Another consideration is around the team. If you have a solid team of folks, a small team of folks, your co-founders, that essentially allow you to go solve this problem almost end to end, as if you didn't have to go hire. But of course, you want to do that to accelerate product development or amplify certain aspects of the team and the company. I think having a solid team right from the get-go is a good setup to starting the company. I think if you're unsure about some of those things, unsure about the passion in your idea and the market opportunity for it, right. You can always attack it at a later time. Right?
Yeah. So so you raised another good question, which I think comes up a lot, and that's having a co-founder. So I know that Y Combinator is a strong believer in co-founders. They'll even encourage a solo founder to find a partner. In your case, it sounds like you have co-founders as well. What are your thoughts on being able to do this solo versus having some co-founders?
I just could not imagine having gone through this process on my own. I mean, it is an incredibly tough kind of mental challenge to go through, right? There are ups and downs throughout the way. And if you have someone you trust that you work with very closely to bounce ideas and give feedback, because ideally that person is complementary to you in some way through their skill sets, experiences, and background, I think that's so important to have. It would be really hard if I tried to start this on my own. And I'm so grateful for the fact that I do have really great co-founders to work with.
Yeah, I think you've raised a really good point, which is the power of the network. And this comes up again and again. It's something I recommend even for people that want to stay employed by someone else, is that trying to find a new job or a better job is so much easier with a strong network than trying to come in cold. And I think that's absolutely true with trying to find a job. I think it's true with raising funding. I know that when we raised seed round for our startup, I think we did it in less than a month. And it was because we knew so many people, and it was just much easier to get in the door and have those conversations. And not everyone's going to love your idea. So I'm not saying everyone's going to say yes,
right.
But it's a lot easier to have the meeting. Whereas I think without that network, you're kind of beating your head against the wall just to try to get someone to answer your call or your email.
I completely agree. And then that network ends up being references for you too.
Right. Yeah.
The opportunity to work well with those around you and in that network. But they serve as references. So
absolutely. So you're also a member of a number of boards. How has that experience been, and how do you think that actually helped you prepare as well?
Yeah. The board work for me, so I sit on 2 public company boards and a VC-backed company board. I also serve as an advisor to Admiral. But the board work has been an incredible experience. It's been so intellectually stimulating for me.
Yeah.
And seeing things at a whole different level and perspective has made me appreciate what CEOs have to go do.
Yeah.
Company overall faces. And the challenges in getting input from so many different stakeholders, not just internal, but external, your investors or shareholders. It makes it hard to go through decision-making, right? You've got all this input and feedback. How do you really prioritize and figure out what's important to long-term value creation for the company? So it's an incredible experience that I've been lucky to go through, and something that I hope to continue.
So, I had a chance to work with you at Yahoo, and I was very thankful for that. And actually on both sides. I mean, you were on kind of the advertising side, and then you came over to the more of the technology and product side for search. So, I mean, like you said, you got to experience both. And I obviously have my own kind of feelings about, I think, what made you so successful, because I think you've been very successful in your career. But I'm curious what lessons you've learned through that path, going through these corporate environments. Like, what really helped you continue to move up in your career and be recognized?
Yeah. A few things come to mind. One, I'll say that I've had to think about quite a bit is working on company initiatives or projects that are high priority for the company.
Yep.
I think that's helped as far as getting to work things that are extremely challenging and complex, but really getting visibility in the company. Right. So, teams get recognized, the people pay attention to the highest priority initiatives in the company. So I've typically gravitated toward where that might have been. I would say another thing that's really helped me in my corporate career path has been just public speaking skills. It sounds so trivial.
No, I totally agree. Yeah.
Yeah, but tactically, public speaking and the way that you present, you carry yourself, knowing your audience, the content that resonates with them, engaging with them. I think all of that is just so important to help the broader organization understand what it is you're doing and to also get buy-in. And then I would say the third thing that I've thought about is working for the leaders or the managers that are so supportive of you. And this is not just a plug for you, Larry, but I think if it weren't for the fact that you gave me the opportunity to go work in search, that wouldn't have occurred and happened. And I don't think my career would be where it is. So I think the mentors, the bosses that you want to stick with, that you want to work for, that you can learn from is just so important to continue to have.
It was my pleasure. No, it really was. And yeah, I mean, it was great working with you. And I think I use you as an example often because I think there are a few things that you've done that I noted in your career. And these are a few that maybe you don't even know about yourself. I mean, these are those strengths and talents that people have that they don't recognize. But I've never met anyone that was so on top of everything that had to be done. I mean, you never dropped the ball on anything. And you continue to do that even in your interactions with other people, setting this up and having our conversation right now. You don't drop the ball on anything. And I think I don't know how you do it. I wish that I was on top of things as you are, but I think that's been something that served you very well, is that people knew you could always count on Caroline. If you give her something to do, it's going to get done. I mean, there's no question about it. But I think that's important too. And so this mentoring thing, I think, is a critical step that I think people have to find in their career. Now, what's your advice? Because I'm sure you've encountered this, maybe not with yourself, but with other peers. If they aren't finding that in their manager or somebody within the company that they can immediately reach out to, how do they find somebody to help kind of guide them through their career and look for opportunities for them?
Yeah, that's, I would say, a little tough thing. I think if there were former bosses or colleagues that you've even worked with that you could seek advice or help from, that's certainly something to reach out to do. But it is, observing the leaders around the organization and who you really admire and would want to work for. I think and seeking that out. If that's not the relationship or situation you're in, I'm not saying throw everything, throw your hat in the door, but just look at opportunities to go find those folks that you would want to associate with.
Okay. So you've been on the other side of the table, obviously, and done a lot of interviewing and hiring throughout your career, at Yahoo and at HP, and now I know that you're hiring again for your startup. What do you look for? How do you assess? How do you find talent in the first place? Because that's a challenge. There's so much competition for talent. And how do you assess who are the right people you want to bring into your organization?
Yeah, so great questions. One thing I have to say is that hiring should be like an 80% or close to full-time job.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of folks leave hiring up to internal recruiters or external recruiters, and it doesn't become a main focus for them. But you've got to make that a main focus of your role. If you grow the organization, build up the team, and get the things you want to get done. So that's number one. Second thing I would say is, in terms of recruiting, a couple of things that I really look for when I'm building up the talent, right, with the support of the internal organization and their network, or external recruiters or internal recruiters. I'm always looking for folks who have this thirst to go and learn, who want to challenge themselves, will take on initiatives that require new knowledge or learning. So I think that's one, is, do they have that desire and capacity to learn and grow and develop?
Right.
Number two, I would say, this is just more general traits, would be just the kind of the balance between execution as well as thinking of new opportunities. It depends on the product or what they're actually working on, necessarily inside the organization and their role. But do they know how to be a bit agile in how they're working? Because in any organization, you're growing, things are changing, priorities are changing. So are they adaptive to that? And will they stick through and be a team player, in the sense that they want to see through the work they're doing?
Right.
So I would say those are kind of two main traits that I look for, beyond specific skills or experience.
Sure. Yeah. What are the showstoppers? So, I mean, I think we've all had that experience. And I know, for example, one for me, you bring somebody in to interview for a position and they weren't familiar with your company or the product. They hadn't even tried it, and yet they were interviewing for the job. So for me, that was a bit of a showstopper. It's like, hey, if you can't even care enough to try our product before you come in, you're probably not going to do a great job here. But do you have any showstoppers that when you're interviewing somebody, you're like, okay, this isn't going to work?
I think it really depends. There could be a number of things, from the actual skill set and experience, where and there's just no way. if you're working with a potential engineer, right, and they can't get through a problem that you're putting in front of them, then that could be one thing.
Right.
Others would be, and their ability to work with the rest of the team. I typically dig in on references that aren't references they necessarily gave me.
Right.
Others they might have worked with that I find, just to do some back checking on that. So I think that's really important. And then, sometimes to just kind of head this on. I've made a number of hiring mistakes, and there's also a question of how you address that.
Sure.
But even early on, there are types of challenges or kind of interview tests, if you will, that I'll put in front of candidates just to kind of see how they work through something, how interested they are in the product or the company.
Right.
And that helps to kind of weed out candidates as well.
Okay. So if you had to look back over your career and being a leader and a manager of people, what are some bits of advice you would give someone who's moving into management and leadership and wanting to be better at that and improve their skill at that?
Okay. So it's a big transition. And I think the number one thing that we talked about, or that I'd referred to, was the hiring piece.
Mm-hmm.
You have, if you've inherited a team, do you feel that you've got a solid team, leaders that you can really trust to go run with different areas in your organization? If you have the opportunity to build a whole new team from scratch, again, how much emphasis do you place on hiring and building up your team quickly, but putting in place people that you've vetted and really thought that would be great for the organization. So I think that's one first thing to look for. Another is around empowering the individuals on the team, being really clear about the goals and what they're set out to do. I think that's got to be clear from the get-go, or everyone ends up swimming in the organization.
Sure.
And it's hard to kind of rally and move everyone toward a specific kind of vision or end game or something that needs to be executed on. So I would say those are two immediate things to look for.
Okay. So this is a kind of a strange question, but if you were able to go back in time and give advice to young Caroline just getting started in her career, I'm sure you've had some lessons that are like, I wish I hadn't done that, or I wish I'd done more of this, but what would you tell yourself?
Yeah. There are two things I would tell myself that I've learned over the last few years. One is to spend time on those relationships with your peers, colleagues, others in the organization. I think I took that for granted a little bit because I was just so focused on getting my job done. And that was kind of it, or being in this hardcore execution mode, that I had blinders around building up relationships and getting to spend time with my colleagues outside of even immediate projects you might be working on.
Okay.
So I think that's really important for the network building, to learn from others, to find out about opportunities, to show others, right, your expertise, what you are capable of doing. I think that's one. The other is maybe to your earlier comment about getting everything done. I did burn out while I was at HP. The first year and a half was absolutely insane. I reached a point where I burnt out. And that's not a good place to be in. So I think you've got to have a broader perspective around your work, your life in general, and make sure that you do the things that are important for your health. Literally, going to the gym, working out, and sleeping well, because you're just going to be far more productive if you do those things and watch out for that. So I would say take time. Not everything needs to be a rush, or everything needs to be so focused on getting that thing done at work. It's really about your broader life and broader perspective.
I totally agree with that. As you know, I care a lot about that. It's easy to forget that we can break down too, just like any machine can, or your car. If you don't change the oil, it's like, you're very important. You have to take care of yourself, because that's the only way you're going to be successful. So we're about ready to wrap up. So I just wanted to see, I know that you're hiring. So where can people find out more about your company and about you and what you're looking for?
Yeah, well, we are early, so we have just a placeholder website at computesoftware.com. But anyone can reach out to me. Feel free to reach out to me. We actually are looking for a designer that has experience in the enterprise SaaS application world. So we'd love to bring someone on board for short-term to potential long-term opportunity. And just anyone who's facing challenges running in the cloud in AWS today, I'd love to chat, get your feedback, and see if there's an opportunity to work or to partner together.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you for your time today, Caroline. This is Caroline Tsay, the co-founder and CEO of Compute Software. It's been a real pleasure, and I'm sure this is going to be super useful for a lot of people that are trying to figure out, how do I get to where Caroline is? Because it's very impressive. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Larry.
All right. Take care.
You too.